How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Ganji. Welcome to another episode of Tear Talk. Guys, we're going to have a great discussion today. We're going to finally touch on a topic we never really touched on before. And basically it is to review or not to review. That is the question. Should we review the video footage when we have an incident, basically before we write our reports? And the discussion is really because I wrote this book on effective report writing for corrections professionals. And we do discuss this in the book. And by the way, guys, you got to get your hands on this book. The link is in the description. It's costly. It's somewhere between $70 or $80, but this book took a lot of work. Myself, I got Joe and Russ who donated some quotes for me, but the publishing company really went above and beyond with the creation of this book. Guys, this covers so much. It covers the things that are not discussed about, in other training, but we talk about here everything from should we review the footage? I have that here. That's what we're going to discuss today. Should we write in first person or third person? When's the best time to do that? There's just little caveats that I put in along the way, and then the publishing company was just kind of going back and forth with them and what we can put in, what we got to take out, and then to just have this book in your hand. If I was in a training academy, this is what I would want to give to the recruits, the people that are doing it right now as well for refreshers, but I would be carrying this book with me everywhere. It is a truly essential guide. I got to get this book out to Joe and Russ, and I'm thinking down the line, me, Joe, and Russ could develop this into a training, and then if need be, me, Joe, or Russ can come down to the facilities, and there's probably about a week worth of training on report writing. And if you ever want to invest in some training that's worth a week, because it's a week, it's a lot to cover here. I also think it's very interactive. This would be definitely something that you would want to implement. Okay, so again, guys, it's going to be a great discussion. Let me bring in Russ real quick. What's up, Russ?
Hey there, Anthony. How's it going, sir?
Good. Hey, Russ, do you mind introducing yourself to our audience, please?
Yeah, so my name is Russ Hamilton. I'm a former and retired correctional sergeant from California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. I'm also a former senior juvenile correctional officer. Currently, I work for a private company where we do reentry and rehabilitation work for a local county jail where I'm a case manager, and for a probation department, a county probation department. And I am also the founder of Keepers of Chaos, and Keepers of Chaos is dedicated to the brave men and women behind the walls. And not just the ones that wear the badge, though, the ones that perform any function inside of a correctional facility. And we're dedicated toward making people better, safer, and dare I say it, more relaxed, or maybe not relaxed is the word. Here I am going on word searches. But anyway, just make a better type of environment for you so that you can function better in it. A lot of people, they stress out over the job, and I don't think any of us want to see that happen.
Russ, I'm going to bring on Joe, introduce Joe real quick, and then I want to talk about something before we do the show related to this, but I want you to be able to provide a context and basically what we expect from our investigators. And this is just something to put out there before we talk about our main discussion of reviewing video footage. And the reason why I want to do that is because I think this is actually a discussion that also the investigators, admin, whatever, they should also be listening into. But just in case they don't have a lot of time, sometimes that's the case, I want to say something at the very beginning of this show that I think will also help build a better understanding as we move forward with the dialogue. But let me get on with Joe real quick. What do you got, Joe? What's up? You mind introducing yourself, sir?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Good evening. My name is Joe Pomponio. I am a retired lieutenant from the Texas Department of Corrections, 29 years and 6 months. I'm currently working in our local sheriff's department in the jail division as an assistant jail administrator and a panel member here for Tear Talk.
And we love having you, Joe. So real quick, before we go into the dialogue, Russ, I want to read something off to you real quick. And then basically, maybe if you don't mind, if you could just, give your perspective on this, because when me and Russ wanted to do this topic, this was something that Russ was connected to on a very passionate level. And I want to give Russ that respect, because this is definitely something that probably most of us, I'm not going to say most of us, but a good portion of us could have been through, or it could be a perspective that we have. And either way, it's definitely something that I want to mention. I wanted to get out there, and hopefully if we do have investigators or administrators or people that are in the process of reviewing reports, they take into account what we're going to say. But real quick, Russ, I wrote a couple of things down here. I said, in report writing, especially in corrections or law enforcement, there should be room for forgiveness in certain areas to reflect the human element of the work. So investigators should recognize that perfection is not always attainable, given the fast-paced and high-pressure environments officers operate in. Below are some areas where forgiveness might reasonably apply while still ensuring reports remain accurate and professional. So there was 6 areas here. It did mention, Russ, real quick. It mentioned minor errors or typos, memory-based inconsistencies, contextual judgment, and omissions due to time constraints, conflicting reports from different perspectives, and forgiveness with language precision, because we're not legal, we may not be legal experts. Are you able to kind of give us a little more clarity into those 6 areas?
So let me primarily talk about human perception. Okay, human perception at its very best is extremely flawed, and one of the things that makes it even more flawed is when it encounters, let's just say, a critical incident, a situation where it's life or death, a situation where you're facing violence, a situation where there are a lot of moving parts to it. You go out on a yard where you have, 100 inmates fighting, and your chances of accurately recording in your mind what's actually going on are precisely 0. That doesn't mean that there are some things that you may not pick up on, but you're going to miss almost everything that happens there. It's just the way things are. One of the things that happens to us under those situations, and there's kind of a whole spectrum of different things. The first of which is auditory exclusion. When you're in a critical incident, you'll almost certainly lose a large percentage of your hearing. You won't be able to hear your radio. You won't be able to hear your partner. You may not be able to hear anything at all. The other thing that you tend to lose is your vision tends to clamp down, and you experience tunnel vision, where all you can see is that threat that is immediately before you. So, if your body worn camera, or if you have a fixed camera or whatever, up in the eaves, you're only going to see maybe a very small percentage of your cone of sight directly in front of you. So when someone calls you on that, how come you didn't talk about this? How come you didn't report that? They should be aware of these things as they happen. The other thing that tends to happen, I talk about, tachypsychia. Tachypsychia means you have a distortion of time going on before you. Sometimes things will feel very sped up. Sometimes things will feel very slowed down to you. And between all of these different facets of the human psyche, of human physiology, of the way your heart rate starts to change. Some of the other physiology is that your heart rate at a certain point will cause you to lose almost all of your fine motor skills, and maybe even some of your gross motor skills. And so when you're putting all of these things down on paper, you're very likely to make mistakes. Those people who review your reports, those people who investigate them, should be, but are not necessarily aware of, and may have not ever been in a critical incident themselves. They may think that you're lying because you did not review what happened not ahead of time, but you did not review immediately afterwards your body worn camera footage or the set point, different fixed point security cameras that were in the area. And so there may be some people that might view that as being dishonest. There might be some people that view that as, trying to cover up or minimize or justify, when really it's just the way the human psyche is built. And we will often have enough distortion in that what you think happened and what you feel that you experienced and the actions that you took and the actions that other people took may not bear a very close resemblance to what happens in that video. And so, you know, people should be aware of the fact that this does happen. Inattentional blindness, if you want to Google that, you should definitely do it and see what the human psyche misses out on, as well as all these other things that I've explained. So just know that the report that you write, especially when it comes to you know, justifying and recording a use of force that you've been involved in, you should already know the things that you need to do to present as clear a picture as possible for the justification for you using the force that you did. But know this, that sometimes when you're painting that picture for people, you might make some mistakes. But along the way, those mistakes, even though they're distorted in your own psyche, still means that you can bring them to light in a way that allows you to justify what you did. And if you're not familiar with a case called Graham versus Connor, it really goes a long ways toward showing that if you are a trained corrections professional and you're deploying force, that even if you're mistaken about things, you can still be found in the right. And maybe we'll get into some more of that as this thing progresses.
Yeah. Now, guys, I want to get Joe's opinion on this before we move forward with the main dialogue, because Joe used to be an investigator. But I want to mention something. In chapter 10 of this book, we cover psychological impact on report writing. And in section 10.3, I do a quick note to management here. And I say, when it comes to the day-to-day operations on the floor, the experience of going through moments live and in real time can be extremely overwhelming for frontline staff. Management needs to be empathetic to this reality. Most of the time, they read the report safely in their office, far from the heat of the moment. It is crucial for management to understand and connect with the frontline experience so they can fully appreciate the challenges faced by their staff. By acknowledging the intense and often chaotic environment in which these reports are generated, management can better support and guide their teams, fostering a more cohesive and understanding workplace. Now, Joe, I want to kind of go over something real quick with you. I want to just briefly go over those 6 areas again, and then maybe if you had any advice for investigators, because this does make sense, guys. The reason why is because a lot of people, they believe that they need to watch the video because they believe that their reports need to be 100% accurate, and they believe that is the expectation from the people that are reviewing it. And actually, and we'll go over it in a little bit, that may not be what the agency wants, and your perspective of believing that the video gives you that 100% perspective, we're going to tell you where you may be misunderstanding that. And I wanted just to put that out there because I think a lot of people right now believe that that by reviewing the footage beforehand, it will protect them legally. And I think there's some pros and cons to that. So, Joe, real quick, this was what we mentioned before, but incorporating forgiveness in report writing. So I'll just quickly say the 6 real quick, read a little brief thing under it, and then maybe you could just kind of tell me how that plays out when the investigating team is reading a report. So the first we talked about was forgiving minor errors or typos. So minor grammatical mistakes or typos should not be penalized unless they affect the clarity of the report. Investigators should focus on accuracy and not perfection. Allowing for memory-based inconsistencies, that's key. That's probably one of the things we're going to have to wind up discussing here, because that could be the reason why people feel that they need to see the video. And investigators should recognize that officers' memories may differ slightly under stress, and that's covered in this book right now, as I said, chapter 10, especially regarding non-critical details. These inconsistencies can often be clarified through follow-ups or video review, but it's clarified. It doesn't mean you're changing the report. It's just clarity. Acknowledging contextual judgment. Officers' subjective impressions may reflect how they perceive a situation at the time. And investigators should account for these interpretations while focusing on the facts. Forgiving omissions due to time constraints. Reports may initially lack non-essential details due to the fast pace of the job. Supplementary reports or interviews should be allowed for additional clarity. And again, that should not affect the integrity of the report. Reconciling conflicting reports. Investigators should understand that reports from different officers may vary, reflecting unique perspectives. These variations should be reconciled through evidence, not seen as intentional discrepancies. And last one is forgiveness with language precision. Officers are not legal experts, and reports may lack precise terminology. Investigators should prioritize the intent and factual content over technical phrasing. What's your thoughts on all that, Joe? There's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, from an investigative standpoint, when use of force is delivered to me, but I would hope by the time it got to me that all the grammaticals were taken care of ahead of time. It should have went through some sort of proofreading process and, all that stuff. And if it doesn't happen, it's not a big deal. We will send a report back to have it corrected because, there's a few things that you got to realize about a use of force report. I mean, it's not something that, it's not a report that may stay on the unit. It may wind up in a criminal court. It may wind up in some sort of civil suit court. So other people are going to be reading these reports. So we want them to be as professional looking as possible. As Russ said, from an investigator standpoint, you would hope that, being an investigator within a prison environment, that they would have firsthand understanding and knowledge of what the correctional officers and the supervisors go through, and understand, the process, and understand that, there's going to be times when adrenaline's pumping and tunnel vision kicks in. There's going to be things that are going to be left out. There are going to be slight inconsistencies. Again, not a big deal because we account for that. As long as they're not big inconsistencies, the difference between an ID card falling out of an inmate's shirt onto the floor versus a shank falling out of his pants onto the floor. With these reports, you got to also understand that there's going to be a multitude of people reading this, to include jurors, lawyers, judges. There's a whole, multitude. The one thing I do find quite commonly in use of force reports, they teach about the five C's of report writing, being clear, concise, complete, and all that. A lot of people tend to try to not really overinflate the report, but over exaggerate the report by using bigger words than what they need to. Again, these are reports that are going to be read by common people that have no concept of a prison environment. They don't know what you mean when you say the word shank instead of weapon. They don't know what you mean. They may not fully understand what all is involved in the use of force. So you got to make sure that you're using, professional language, but simple language. And like Russ said, when you're in the heat of the moment and you're having the use of force, the tunnel vision kicks in, your adrenaline's pumping, you're not paying attention to your surroundings. Things are happening outside the purview of your peripheral vision at that moment. And you're not going to be able to comprehend it. You're not going to be able to record it. You're not going to be able to remember it. And that's okay. It happens. We know this. But, when we're reviewing these videos, there are going to be times where we have to send these reports back just so that things can be not so much edited, but the gaps filled in, because we want to make sure that if this thing goes the distance, if it goes beyond the administration of a facility, if it winds up going to a criminal court, we want to make sure that all the details are there. We want to make sure we have a solid case. We want to make sure that we're crossing our I's and dotting our T's. Investigators need to keep that in mind, that, not everybody's going to remember everything right off the bat. I know I couldn't without actually reviewing the video. Some states allow you to review the video. Some states want you to review the video. Some states don't want you to review the video. They want you to put all your statements together and pray that it matches somewhere in the end. For me, I think that process where you don't get to review the video, that you write based off of memory, I think is a mismanagement of time, because these are reports that could have been streamlined without wasting so much time on revisions and edits and revisions and edits, and then you add to that, some people, when you get it to a jury, or get it to a lawyer or get it to a judge, they're like, okay, this report matches the video to the T. Why is that? Did they review the video before they made the report? Well, yeah. Okay. Well, why? It gives them a chance to get their stories together. No, not necessarily. I mean, there's going to be pros and cons to each side of this situation. But, as an investigator, the main focus is, from my perspective, is A, to have an understanding of what these officers and supervisors go through on a daily basis at the ground level, boots on ground. B, don't be so critical that, we're overpowering the team with our version of what needs to be on there. Their version is what needs to be there. Our job is to make sure that it matches and is correct. And, give them the space and the latitude to actually make those corrections, but be judgmental enough to know that there's going to be mistakes made.
Right. Now, guys, we're going to do this where we're going to go over specifically the pros right now. Then we'll go over the negatives, and then we'll go over where the balance is. So right now we're going to go strictly about the pros. So guys, if you're watching this from the outside, we'll get into the negatives, but I want to talk, I want to isolate the pros and the cons real quick. And then when we go to balance things out, you'll see where they start to blend. Because if we talk about both at the same time, if I talk about the pros and start, trying to complement the dialogue with the negatives, it's going to weed out the whole second half of this discussion. So again, guys, the first thing I have here, so to review or not to view, the topic is basically, should we look at the footage beforehand? And to be honest with you guys, you got to know what the policies are at your facility. That's going to tell you what you're allowed to do and what you can't do. And obviously, you got to follow those guidelines. But this is just our perspective on it. And hopefully you guys can just get a better understanding of basically the benefits or the cons on either side of the coin. All right, so the first thing I got is accuracy and objectivity. So basically when you're able to view the footage. So we're going to go over the pros first, guys. We're going to do the pros from viewing the footage. So let's stay strictly with the pros. But for accuracy and objectivity, if you're able to watch the video before you write your reports, it's going to ensure reports reflect factual details, and it reduces errors and memory bias. And then it also confirms timelines, actions, and events with precision. So that's a pro. And we'll get into the counter of that, but that's a pro, right? I mean, we were so concerned that people may look for certain inconsistencies, even the smallest of ones, and then hold us liable to that. So a lot of people in fear may want to say, well, then I want to watch the video, and then I want to write exactly what I did from what the video shows. So it makes sense. So you want a report that's more accurate and more objective, so less subjective. So there's a benefit to that. So I'll start with Russ first. Russ, strictly within the pro of this, accuracy and objectivity. I mean, it makes sense, right, when you're reviewing the video?
Yeah, and if you've ever been involved in very many situations, as I have, there's a lot of different things that are unwinding and unfolding as you go. You're down there, maybe you're on the ground. You've already applied your cuffs to one inmate. There's another inmate that needs to be cuffed. You turn back around, you throw your hand out. Your buddy hands you another pair of cuffs. You put that one on. And as you're going through all of these evolutions of different tactics and strategies and bringing things under control, you're not necessarily going to remember who handed you the cuffs. You're not necessarily going to remember who you gave this inmate to go get cleared at medical. And as these things unfold, a lot of people want, okay, so you've handed him off to this one guy, and then that guy has to do his own report about you handing him off to him. And it's almost impossible, you know, in a situation where there's more than just, you know, 2 or 3 things that went on, to remember everybody that was involved, all of the situations with regard to, you know, what you were doing, what you were accomplishing. And so sometimes being able to review, you know, that footage, go, oh yeah, that's right. You know, Smith was there. He was the one that that pointed out that you know, the guy had a puncture wound on him, and that's what brought it to you, or whatever it is. And so that is definitely a pro facet of if you were to be able to review the footage. And it does make it more accurate. It does make it more objective. But as Anthony said, we will get to some of the potential negatives on that as we go. Does that make sense, Anthony?
No, it makes 100%. I appreciate with you just giving the one side, because then we can explore that more on the other side. But yes, 100%. I agree with you 100%. And Joe, let's, you know, you agree, right? You're looking at the video, of course. That's going to be, when you're writing your report based on the video, of course, it's going to be, or should be, pretty accurate and very objective.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You know, when you're reviewing it, it ought to be 100% accurate. You know, and like Russ said, there's going to be times where you're in the heat of things and you're not going to remember small details. Like, you know, I went down to the ground with this inmate. I thought I grabbed his right hand with my left hand, when in fact I grabbed his left hand with my right hand. You know, there's going to be inconsistencies in details, and that's why, you know, one of the pros in being able to review the video from a use of force is so imperative. You know, on top of that, I've had times where I went back and reviewed the video and found that I was actually trying to put cuffs on a guy while he was trying to bite me. And I never knew that he was actually trying to bite me because he never made contact, but I never knew he was actually attempting to until I reviewed the video, or that he was able to discard drugs at the last moment that none of us seen because we were so in the heat of the moment on the use of force. You know, being able to review that video is pretty imperative for that fact. Because number one, the video doesn't lie. You know, you can't alter those facts. It's there. It's not something that you can kick around back and forth and say, well, I thought this happened. I thought that happened. The video says this is what happened. So, you know, it's 100% foolproof. It's the most accurate version of events you're ever going to have in a situation without having to rely on somebody else's testimony, statement, or objectivity of facts.
Yeah. And then, and guys, as I said, I mean, that is the benefit. We got 4 more benefits real quick, and then we'll cross into the cons. So I also have this, and when me and Russ were talking, Russ made a very good point in the vehicle. I'm sorry, when I was in my vehicle, where, you know, police will definitely be able to review their body cam footage because they may need it for specific details, like a license plate of a car, whatever it is. So they're looking at it for details. So I felt, based on what Russ said, it also helps with evidence-based reporting, provides verifiable support for investigations, disciplinary actions, or legal proceedings, and it limits disputes about incidences by grounding reports in observable evidence. So, like we said, this is here. It's what you can see. So this is the evidence. And then when you're writing your report and it's truly based on the video, that's a great thing to partner up and give to the investigator. Here's a play-by-play, as if you're, you know, watching a football game and you got the announcer giving you the play-by-play. I mean, that's pretty much what you're giving to them. You're spelling it out and you're providing a narrative that plays out very well with the video, which leaves very little room for the investigator to have to discern or provide an interpretation, because it's pretty much what's on camera. I'll start with Joe first, but Joe, evidence-based reporting, I mean, that is a benefit.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, it is. It's a benefit, you know, for police officers, especially that are out on the street, you know, in the heat of it, in the thick of it, and also for the correctional professionals. I mean, you know, let's face it. You know, there are things that happen inside the penitentiary that, you know, the naked eye doesn't always see. Again, the video camera doesn't lie. The video camera sees all, tells all. So, you know, it's great to have as a go-to source for any kind of evidentiary value, you know, such as, you know, just before you go hands on, you know, you're not focused at the front of this inmate because you're behind him. He's walking away from you. And then you're trying to keep him from getting rid of contraband, and you go to grab him and you think your motion took him to the floor when in fact your motion allowed him to kind of discard that evidence to somebody else. And you're able to identify that evidence as you know, where it lands and what it was. So, you know, having that video camera there and being able to review that footage after the fact not only gives you a clearer and more concise picture of what actually took place, but it's actually a good tool to have because it allows you to gain extra evidence that you may use criminally or be able to use criminally or administratively against an offender.
Yep. And what's your thoughts on that, Russ, for the evidence-based reporting?
Yeah, you know, the ability to, you know, immediately review something that happened where, you know, you don't necessarily, you know, have all the facts at hand, you know, can be really, you know, invaluable. You know, and Joe just, you know, gave several examples there. You know, people can, you know, hand off drugs, they can hand off weapons, they can stash weapons. And all of these things may be things that you were in proximity to, but you didn't necessarily witness. Whereas the camera did witness that. The one problem with the camera, of course, and I'll go more into maybe a couple of stories and stuff, is that while it sees everything that happened, it doesn't necessarily know the why behind what happened, which oftentimes we're able to fill in, hopefully. But having that ability to immediately review and use it in ways where you're maybe able to actually go back and retrieve the drugs, maybe you're actually able to, you know, go back and retrieve a license plate number or something like that can be invaluable. And the prohibition against doing that, you know, could actually, you know, hurt you potentially in ways by not being able to go back and adjust to those things that you didn't see at that immediate moment.
Okay, so that brings us to transparency and accountability. So I have it as reviewing footage ensures that the content of reports matches what is captured on video, which builds trust within the facility and with external parties, such as investigators or legal bodies. This alignment reduces the likelihood of accusations of bias or misconduct, as officers' accounts can be verified and cross-checked against objective evidence. Additionally, footage allows for accountability by enabling comparisons between officers' actions during incidences and their written narratives. This helps ensure that reports are accurate and that any inconsistencies or misrepresentations can be identified and addressed, promoting professional conduct. You know what's funny, as I'm reading this, and we'll go with Russ first, I actually, with the video footage, reviewing it, and then doing your report after you reviewed it or while you're reviewing it, it could promote a better relationship between you and the investigators because it's actually giving them less work to some extent. But what's your thought on the transparency and accountability, Russ?
Yeah, you know, when you have a complex situation that required complex strategies or tactics to be employed and so forth, and you're able to, you know, review these things, and not in real time, of course, but in almost real time, and then you know, go back and ask other people that were also involved in it because, you know, you saw them on a particular piece of video or whatever, and you're able to glean some knowledge, some insight, some facts, and add those into your report and make it more cohesive. I mean, some people are going to say, "Oh, they're just getting their, you know, they're just getting their stories straight." Well, you know, they're getting their stories straight, but it's for, you know, a very specific purpose, and that's to, you know, make sure that there is absolutely, you know, no questions left unanswered. And so, you know, people have, you know, different ideas about what this entails. And so is that a good thing? Yeah, it can be. Are there times where it could be bad and it could be portrayed in a bad light, or it could actually perhaps be part of a bad light? Yeah, all of these things are possible. but that doesn't negate a potential, upside in actually using it or doing it. And so we're just, trying to, throw as much knowledge and facts out there to be able to, let people start to draw their own conclusions and maybe actually be able to cobble together a really good policy and procedure for doing these things. And if not a policy and procedure, definitely an education to be able to present to these people that actually have to go in and either review the reports or investigate the incident as it occurred.
I agree. And what's your thoughts, Joe?
I love this section of the use of force because it's the only time that an armchair quarterback is going to be able to shine. I love this portion of the use of force because of the fact that, when you have a use of force and mistakes are made, it's a great learning tool. It's something that you can use to benefit others so that they don't make the same mistakes you did. I think it's a great learning tool to have transparency and accountability. There are going to be times where technical violations have happened, such as, for example, Sergeant Hamilton states, in his statement states that he successfully applied hand restraints to inmate Ganji. However, upon arrival to medical, it was determined that, inmate Ganji had an injury to his right wrist from the handcuffs. During a review of the video showed that Sergeant Hamilton did not double lock the right cuff, which he thought he did. Small technical things like that, it's, when the adrenaline's pumping, your brain thinks you have double locked these cuffs, but you didn't. And it might have caused an injury. Not that, a red mark or a purple mark on the arm or on the wrist, nothing drastic. But the greatest part of it is if you have a supervisor who is, who has his weight in gold, has reviewed the video and spotted that and put that in his summary, in his supervisor summary, it should, it should be noted that, Sergeant Hamilton did apply hand restraints. However, he forgot to double lock the right cuff, which ultimately resulted in a minor injury to the inmate's wrist. So when it comes to the investigator, I see this and I don't even have to address it because it's already been addressed. Total transparency and accountability, and I've done it myself. I've done that in my supervisors. I've stated in there that upon reviewing the video, it was determined that Sergeant Hamilton did not, in fact, double lock the right handcuff, resulted in a minor injury to the offender's wrist. Sergeant Hamilton was issued a letter of instruction as a reminder to make sure that he's always, to ensure that he always double locks the handcuffs when he's placing restraints on an inmate. So being totally transparent but yet having accountability for your staff is awesome. This is the part of the use of force that I've always loved. And like I said, it's the only time that an armchair quarterback can sit back and actually shine and point out small inconsistencies in these things. Which is fine to a degree. But always keep in mind that as your use of force is going through the chain, most of them go through a lengthy administrative process in the chain before it even goes to the investigators to look at. And once it comes to us, we determine, okay, Sergeant Hamilton didn't double lock that cuff. Is this a criminal thing? No, it was just a stupid mistake on his part during the heat of the moment, which adrenaline or whatever. But like I said earlier, the best part of it is I don't even have to address it a second time because, Lieutenant Pomponio already addressed it in his supervisor summary and he took corrective action. Therefore, I don't even need to address this any further. So when it gets to a court, they can see that, the administrative side of it has already addressed any technical violations or procedural violations that may have taken place. Now, as as Russ stated, it's a double-edged sword sometimes. When you review the video, you find that somebody got an extra punch in or got an extra kick in. That's where the oh shits come about, because it's on video. You can't make that go away. You can't clean that up. You have no choice but to address it. And you have to address it.
I agree, Joe. And you know what's funny? As we're talking about this, and we go down the list to kind of see where the benefits play out most, where if the benefits play out more to the front line or more to management or the agency or both. I mean, to be honest with you, if you had a scale, the benefits so far would be for both. When it comes to accuracy and objectivity, that would be for both. Evidence-based report writing would be for both. Here, I was going to lean a little more towards the agency, but with that said, it's definitely applicable to both. And the next part I got is training and learning opportunities. I think that's extremely important. I'll have Russ. I know Russ went first last time, but I know this is like Russ' area here, so I'll have Russ go first, and then I'll get you twice, Joe, for the next one. But for here, reviewing footage can help officers reflect on their performance and identify tactical improvements, and allows for the identification of best practices and lessons from real incidences. This may be, I may lean the scale here more towards the front line, but, more trained staff ultimately balance the scale for the agency. But maybe initially at first, that should be a benefit for the front line, but eventually a shared benefit. But Russ, I mean, that's key, right? I saw you kind of, excited about this one.
Yeah. When body worn cameras were first coming out, and I never had the opportunity to have one, and I heard lots of people say things that I think that they really were clueless about. But that's why I give myself up in that I never had a chance to use them. As they're saying, oh, this is going to put us under the microscope, or this is going to do that. And I say, no, man, this is going to give us the chance to produce evidence, to really nail these guys, especially, when we're talking about things like, let's say threats, because those are going to potentially be caught on there. But the one thing that I really saw it doing is, if I had one, I would have been able to show people the way that I see the yard, the way that I see the dorm, the way that I see the cell, the way that I see, an inmate who's approaching me. And I would be able to use those as endless opportunities to talk about contraband and searches and manipulation and gangs and gang mindset and group dynamics and all of these other things. And so I think that, I just missed it by, a few months or a few years or whatever, of being able to have that as a real tool. Now, when we talk about, reviewing things at the beginning versus reviewing them, later on, if a clarification is needed, I don't think that that the training part of this necessarily comes into that, because a lot of this could be viewed at a later date and doesn't have to be done right then and there for the most part. But I think that people that are anti-body worn camera are missing the boat on this thing. I think that this gives us a chance to more often than not prove that we were in the right, more often than not to be able to come up with that extra little piece of evidence that we need, and more often than not put us in a position to better know and understand what we're seeing without aid of the camera, because we've reviewed so much video in the meantime and learned where we came up short with regards to all these things that we see. Because I would, like I say, I would love to have been able to, shown people things that I saw that I was able to point out and get ahead of, time after time, and show them, how I searched and how I was able to find things, and why I was able to, get a confession out of an inmate and things like that. But it was just never available to me. So this one here, I think it's technically kind of a little bit of a wobbler, but I wanted to point out some really good things about this body worn camera thing. that a lot of people don't want to think about or aren't taking under advisement, going, hey, we can use this. We can leverage this to be something good instead of just poo-pooing it and always seeing the downside of things.
Yeah, and guys, depending on what the incident is, if it is a criminal investigation or it could lead to the potential of a criminal investigation, you have to make sure you get all the proper releases before you're allowed to utilize that, which means proper clearance. All right.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah. What do you got?
Just to go back to, because like I say, I would have loved to have had this, but I was involved in an incident where we had an inmate that it turned out later, we didn't know this ahead of time. He'd been ordered to stab a white blood that had come onto our yard, and we were unaware of that at the time. And when he was approached by staff, he had taken off running, and for whatever reason, he ended up running toward me. And during the course of their pursuit for this guy, because they didn't know what was going on at the time, I didn't know what was going on at the time. But as he turned back toward them, he pulled a shank up out of his pants, and he was just within, a few feet of me. And I, at that point, I had got ready to deploy my baton because I thought that this was going to be a life or death situation. And he turned around and saw me and stuck the shank in the ground and covered it up with his chest. I ended up, taking him into custody. One of my partners showed up and I said, hey, he's got a shank right under him. Be careful. And that was great. In that circumstance, if we'd had body-worn cameras and that thing had gone south, it would have gone a long ways towards justifying the force that we might have had to use. And I say that, with respect to thinking about, everyone's going to say, well, you know what, he had a shank, but he wasn't going to do anything, or no, you weren't justified hitting him in the head, or all of these other things. But in a case like that, it would have held up in court and been, good as gold. The other thing that it would have done is, because this one did go to court, is he ended up getting, I want to say it was like an additional 3 years, I think. But if I'd had that extra little piece of evidence, instead of him getting to take a deal and only do 3 years, he could have potentially done much more. And so, and I just thought of this particular incident after all these years, and just thought, wow, what a body-worn camera could have done in that situation.
Yeah. And what's your thoughts, Joe?
The good part about these videos is somewhere down the line, we're making a training video or we're adjusting our use of force continuum because of your video. There may have been something in that video that we've seen that we want to incorporate in the use of force policy that wasn't there before. Or, the downside is that, there was something in there that you did that you should not have done because it wasn't part of the use of force continuum. There's ample opportunities to use these videos and use these experiences for both good and bad. And, the way today's environment is, I would implore that most people would use these for, positive training results. This is what happened. This is what we did. This is what we could have done better. It went okay, but we could have done better in this area. We could have done better in this area. Maybe our reports were just a tad bit sloppy. But the good thing about the video is there's always something to gain from the video, whether it's training tool, criminal evidence, civil evidence. There's always something to learn from that video. And, it's really in the eye of the beholder is what good value are you going to take away from that video to use as an advantage to further train your staff? Not necessarily, we're not using these videos to embarrass the people that made small technical violations or did something that they probably shouldn't have, but wasn't necessarily against the use of force policy. or something that they did do that wasn't a part of the use of force policy that was like, shit, why didn't I think of that? Why don't we incorporate this into the use of force policy? So there's always benefits. There's always benefits in learning, from our mistakes.
Yeah. And then I also have kind of what Russ touched on, but maybe just on the opposite side of all, where, yes, you can prove something happened or not happened. We have the protection against false allegations. So reports supported by video evidence can protect officers from unjust accusations of manipulative claims, which we get all the time, and that ensures that officers' actions are accurately represented, preventing misinterpretations. I think this actually is one of the benefits of having the cameras. So I know when they were trying to issue body-worn cameras nationally, a lot of people were more concerned about having the videos on them, which technically these body-worn cameras are not for that. They're not to really monitor staff, but there is still a level of responsibility that comes with having those cameras on, So with that said, it's definitely something that's great to have when you're having an interaction with an inmate and it starts to go sour. Put that camera on and to go ahead and now have something that supports what happened. So now when I'm writing my report, you have exactly verbatim what the inmate said, what you said, and it can be very, very helpful. And then also when you put the body-worn camera on and you have it on video, you got to make sure that the disciplinary hearing officer knows that it was recorded, because you're going to want the footage and you're going to want the disciplinary hearing officer to have that footage. So when they review it, they have your report. So inside the report, you could put noted, please check body-worn camera, blah, blah, blah. What's your thoughts on, I'm going to go with Joe first on this one, but Joe, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, having a body-worn camera or, a video surveillance system of what, of any kind of alleged incident is a good thing to have for evidentiary value. A lot of people, like you said, had heartache about getting these body cameras because they're already in a frame of mind where they're trying to get us run off. They want to see our bad actions, and they're trying to get me crossed out, and and it's not for that. It's for their protection. It's evidence that we can use to clear their good name. And having it there is a good thing. It really is, because, especially in the world of PREA, the Prison Rape Elimination Act, all of the allegations that come just from that alone, would clear so many individuals, one that was alleged in voyeurism. Well, he's watched me all the time. He was watching me do this. He was watching me do that. He was watching me in the restroom. Okay, well, we looked at this body-worn camera, and most of the facilities that have body-worn cameras, there are people who can Bluetooth into any of those cameras at any time they want to. They have access to it regardless of whether recording or not. And I can see that this officer didn't do anything. So, therefore I can call bullshit on this inmate's allegations and close out another pre-allegation. Same thing with the use of force. Well, he provoked it. He came up and he poked me in my chest, or he poked me in my head or my face, or he got in my face. And, no, when I looked at the body-worn camera, you were the one that stepped to him. And, as a matter of fact, here, let me turn this computer around so you can see for yourself that you're full of shit. So, having these videos, it's not, we don't have them there to eliminate staff. We have them there to eliminate allegations against staff.
Mm-hmm. And that's so well said, because that's true. But now you have to make sure staff understand that, because sometimes they don't see that.
I'd be fired in a week.
Hey, Russ, what's your thoughts?
When you consider, the number of false allegations that you go through, in a career, and I had, any number of them against me, this would have gone a long ways toward alleviating those. And so I think that, everything that we can do to give ourselves, one up on the inmate population to help clear us faster, or or to, give ourselves a chance to leverage them for proving, hey, look, you were the one that did this, not me. I think, goes a long ways toward making us, or it should be making us, feel more secure about our actions, about our facility, and about our ability to, operate in that environment. So I think overall, yeah, definite plus.
All right, so now we're going to go ahead and start talking on the cons. Now, guys, so remember, we put a little bit of a context on what, let me just fix this here. We had a little bit of a context when we talked about what we expect from the investigator. So my thing here, before we mention the cons, I just want to put a bit of a context here. I'm very big in wanting to get the officer's perspective, and it's kind of be in the background of the cons that we have here. And I think by reviewing the footage to some extent, you're going to start to slowly eliminate that perspective, because you may feel that the perspective doesn't align with the video. And we'll get to that. But my greater concern, though, just in context, not off topic, but just in context, is that I think the problem with the world right now and how they see what we do is they only look at the video and they don't understand what's going on in our mind when we make those decisions. So I think when we go right to the video and then we start creating the narrative from the video, as opposed to creating the narrative from what we felt in the moment, it eliminates a very important piece of what the decision of what we did right or wrong could be, which is our perspective of the incident. And we'll get into this more, but my biggest concern is when you draft a report based on what the video shows, as opposed to not based on how you felt, you're going to wind up eventually aligning your perspective with the video. And that may wind up getting you in a bit of trouble, because it may eliminate the thought process as you try to create a narrative that fits the picture by eliminating your subjectivity. So the first thing I got right now that's a con is, and guys, by the way, this is if you're, we'll get to it, but this is if you're relying on the video. So this is not, and we'll get to the balance later on, but just for clarity here, this is not using the video as a support function, but rather relying on the video to write your report, or to tell the narrative to write the report. So we'll get to the support function later, and that's where the balance will be. But having said that, if you're relying on the video for your narrative, that's where the cons here will come in. So the first con we got right now are going to be blind spots and just in general, incomplete context. What I mean by incomplete context real quick is going to be your subjective interpretation. That's a very big part of the context of what it is that you're dealing with, because the situation is one thing, but how you interpret the situation is really what matters most when an incident is being reviewed. Okay, so I'll start with, do we get to do Joe twice first, or does it matter? Should I do Joe one more time and then go back to Russ?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So Joe, what's your thoughts on blind spots and incomplete context?
Yeah, the thing about the blind spots is, we have, most facilities have a comprehensive camera system, but there are blind spots. Same with body cams. It doesn't always give you a 360-degree view of what's happening. There could be things going on within that situation where you reacted, and the video shows you reacted. Later on down the line, the general public sees this video. They don't understand why you reacted the way that you did. So there's going to be times where things are seen on video, even as me, as an investigator, when I watched the video and I went, I kind of eased back when, damn, he was just walking him, and then all of a sudden he slammed him to the ground. What the hell happened? Well, what I didn't see on the opposite side of this fender was, even though he's handcuffed behind his back, he's trying to reach around, like he's acting like he's trying to pull his pants up, but he's actually grabbing for a weapon, trying to stick this other officer. And you can't always see complete angles. So there's going to be times where you see videos and you subjectively go, okay, well, they slammed this guy for no reason. No, not necessarily the case. They put him on the ground for a damn good reason, because what I didn't see was the fact that this guy was reaching for a shank on this video. And it could be because of narrow field of vision, bad quality video, I mean, there's a multitude of things and reasons why. So that's one of the reasons why that we should never always 100% put our faith in a video, because there's going to be things that we see and don't quite understand in the moment why that happened. You know, a video should be used, you know, for evidence, absolutely. But it always should be followed up by good written statements by witnesses there at the scene, because they can give you the view. They can give you that statement from the view that the camera didn't see, you know, and kind of back that play and make you understand, you know, after seeing the video and you read the statements and you see, okay, well, you know, Sergeant Ganji had to use force on this guy, or, you know, Sergeant Hamilton had to use force on this guy, but Officer Ganji states in the statement that, you know, this guy was reaching for a shank. Well, I couldn't see that on the video. So we shouldn't always 100% put our faith in the video, because there's going to be things that take place that A, people don't understand, B, people can't see because, you know, obstructions or whatever. You know, so video should be used as a primary with supported documentation from witnesses there at the scene.
Yeah, I like what you said, Joe, because outside of the subjective context, you also have the situation as well that may not be caught on camera, but could have caused someone to react. The nuances, you know, small things. And again, guys, by the way, reviewing the footage also gives you a lot more knowledge than you have on the scene at the time. So there's that hindsight bias that plays out as well when you're writing creating a narrative based on what you see on video versus creating a narrative based on how you felt. What's your thoughts, Russ, on this?
Yeah, you know, I really like what Joe said, you know, about what the camera doesn't capture, because, you know, in body-worn cameras, objects and things and bodies can get in the way. And the same thing about fixed cameras. You never know what they're going to capture, what they're not going to capture, or what they can't capture. You know, it can show, you know, a camera can show exactly what happened, but not necessarily the why behind it. You know, I was in a situation with a couple of other officers once, and what the video captured was interesting, because it showed me deploying pepper spray on this inmate, and then as he was you know, coming back towards me, I deployed my baton and I had it in both hands, and I ended up, you know, striking him using a two-handed strike. And you know, the way it looked on the camera was kind of bizarre looking, needless to say. But what the camera couldn't tell you is that the entire surface of the area where we were had been coated by this time by OC pepper spray, and it was really slick cement, and so it made it really hard for us to fight this guy. And I don't think anything would have necessarily been called into question just because of the video. But if things had gone slightly different, it certainly could have changed things. But there's no way that anyone knows that we were slipping around on that surface without the reports that accompanied it. The second thing that happened during this particular incident was, once I got over the top of this guy, and once I had him, you know, face down and against the cement, he had his hands trapped underneath him. And you can't see any of that really on the video. But my thought was, of course, is that we do not have this guy. He's not been patted down. He hasn't been searched at this point. He's not restrained. And so I'm a little bit less limited on what I can do to him. I can apply some, you know, severe force to him. And so at that point, I was able to bring my baton back around and thread through his elbow and wrench his arm up and back and instruct him then to reach back behind with his other arm and give it up to me so that I could handcuff him. Because my thought process, which does not appear on the camera anywhere, is that he could have been reaching for a weapon. And I was in a, you know, potentially vulnerable spot with regards to that. And yeah, it all turned out okay. But at the time when I'm able to put that in my report, regardless of what the camera shows, and give them an insight as to why I was deploying the type of force that I was deploying, and why I was concerned about what was going on, and the fact that things were really slippery with regards to the OC pepper spray and everything else that was going on. If I was going to rely on the camera to show what happened, it might not have been as clear cut with regards to the person who ended up reviewing it. So these are all things, that you have to be able to, express in your report, and also resolve with the camera to reconcile things.
Yeah. So, and
Does that make sense?
No, it does, Russ. It does, and it partners very well with what Joe said. For the time-consuming process, I want to mention something here. This is a negative too. I have written down while reviewing footage improves accuracy, it can slow down the reporting process, especially when incidents are frequent or access to footage is limited. This can strain operations, particularly in understaffed facilities. I want to mention something here. So if you have facilities that by policy allow you to review it, then maybe it may be easier to come up with a system where you can get the video, where for some facilities, it may not be that easy, especially if it could be a criminal matter. Access to the video could be a concern, could mess with the due process or the objectivity of what's, the investigation. But with that said, outside of just getting the video, I think there's another area that could also be very time consuming is if you're allowed to review the footage. I don't know what the procedure would be. I'm not familiar with that procedure. I'm not used to reviewing the footage. That's not something I've practiced in areas where I've worked. But with that said, whether it's done with the supervisor and one-off, or the supervisor and whoever went through the incident, or whether it's done where they get to watch it alone, or whether they get to watch it with the team, it could be a little bit confusing, because if the person's going in believing this happened, and then when they watch the video, they see something that's slightly different. And what I mean by slightly different, guys, it's just their perspective. So basically it's more of the why maybe, or something that is maybe subtle. But with that said, either way, maybe they're in a little bit of disbelief, and now showing them the video could be a very confusing process for them, because now that's where they may have either some dissonance, or maybe they're going to have to start thinking like, oh my God, why did I do that then, if that's what happened? And then you could start to see where it becomes time consuming is their narrative shifts, where if I told the person to write their report based on what you feel happened, it may be a bit quicker. I mean, yes, they just gone through it and we have the psychological effects, but they pretty much are pretty comfortable to some level of what they believe in accordance to how they felt. Now, when you introduce this other element of, wait, don't write it yet, watch the video first. If there's some conflict, not extreme conflict, but even just some conflict in what they felt versus what they see on video, this whole process could wind up being a lot longer, because they're going to be confused, and then they're going to have to look to validate their narrative, validate what they saw on video, which now can cause them to go back and try to question what they originally felt when they went through the scenario, which I feel is a very, very, this is my thing, I feel it's a very, very bad move at this point, because now your perspective is being minimized. So now you could fit the narrative of what the video showcases, which slowly starts to eliminate your subjective perspective. What's your thoughts on that, Russ? Because that's definitely a big part of it.
Yeah, that, all of that is, well taken under consideration. When I think about things that can, take up more of that time, and a couple of incidents that I've been in, I know that one time I had a use of force, and it was so simple, and it was so fast, and I was so unconcerned about it that, I completed my report. And then, I had to have the footage brought over to me, and I reviewed the footage. And then I was just like looking at it, and I was like, well, I said that I, turned around clockwise, and that I had taken and reached down between the inmate's cuffs, because I had placed him in cuffs, but he tried to get away from me. And I just kind of cradled that chain in the crook of my elbow, and pulled up real quick, and that dropped in. He was a big, tall guy. I had got it completely wrong in my head about which way I had rotated. And it just kind of like made me think, hey, if things had gone different, I would have submitted this report and it would have looked really funny on the video. But with regards to when we just talk about, and that actually saved me some time. But if we're waiting all the time to try and get the footage collated or to get access to it, it can slow things down precipitously. And I think one of the things, unfortunately, in this day and age is that we're always being put in a pinch for time. Too many people want to run the process of what we're doing in the prison, and they never give us time to slow down. And so, for good or bad, I think that the footage thing and being able to review it are things that they're not going to want us to do, just simply for the time element.
Yeah, I agree with that, and it's good that we brought that up, because I don't think a discussion like this has ever been done anyway. But that would be one area I don't think that's talked about as much, and that's good for even for those that may be adamant. I got to see the footage. I got to see the footage. I think it's good to let them know it could be a very time-consuming process. Now, does that mean that it negates the need? I mean, I have my own reasons why I feel viewing the video footage may not always be as instrumental as you may think it is when it comes to creating your narrative. But with that said, the time-consuming concern is a big factor. Especially if you don't, if the videos go into the prosecutor's office or something. Now all you're going to have is your report, because you're not going to be able to get a hold of that video. What's your thoughts on that, Joe? The time-consuming.
The reviewing of the video, or just the process in general is time consuming. So I mean, it is what it is. The one bit of advice I will offer during this process is, when you're reviewing the video, don't take too much time reviewing the video. Review your actions and drive on from there. Don't watch the video repeatedly over and over and over to the point where you're second guessing yourself. You're second guessing, was I correct in this use of force? Was I justified in this use of force? Review the video, document your actions, and let another set of eyes look at the process. That's the reason why, as a lieutenant, I would have my sergeants do the uses of forces, gather the statements, review the video, let him give me a verbal briefing, and then I would watch the video and kind of, put it against the statements, and to make sure that everything was justified, everything was fluid. I've seen people review these videos and go from being, and it was a legit use of force. I remember one in general. I mean, this dude kicked himself in the ass even after it was all said and done, because he watched the video so many times that he felt that he was unjustified at that point. Even though you could clearly see that this guy spit on him, he turned his head to spit on this officer. He felt that after watching the video that he wasn't justified. Don't watch the video to the point where you're second guessing yourself, because that's where your statement gets all screwed up. That's where your version of facts gets all screwed up. And don't take too much time on it. It's just like studying for a board going up for promotion. Don't spend so much time on this that you forget the basics of a use of force. Watch it, notate it, drive on. Let somebody else.
Russ, I noticed you wanted to comment on that, correct?
Yeah, that was really good what Joe was saying right there. But one thing I wanted to point out is that, if you do it from the reviewer's viewpoint, and you want to, just see if you are in line with the things that happen, allow yourself to view the video once and then decide, how much can you actually take away from that. And then obviously you're going to have to perhaps review it numerous times, but just think about that, that officer and what they were doing in that moment, and was having to make split-second decisions and do things, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, That's where there's an area of maybe forgiveness isn't the right term that I want, but just, understanding that, working under that amount of pressure, you can make mistakes. You can even be, out of pocket, out of policy, out of procedure, and still be in the right under certain circumstances. I know earlier I mentioned, Graham versus Connor. And there's another one, I think it's Johnson versus Glick, I think is the one. And they have a saying in there that the Supreme Court came up with that says that, not every push and shove, especially when it's being reviewed within the peace of a judge's chamber, no matter how unwarranted it might seem, doesn't necessarily equate to a violation of a person's rights. And so that's one of the things that we really have going for us, is just because we may have done something that wasn't completely in the right doesn't mean that we were completely in the wrong either, because of that time frame, that time element, and the fact that we're having to make life and death decisions fast. We're human. And so there is an element of forgiveness potentially in that.
Yeah, I want to add one other thing too to this. I could picture this happening. So if I'm watching the video, now I get for the first time, I'm really leaning on what Joe and you were saying, Russ, is I'm looking at the first time, not just my own actions, but the totality of circumstance, which includes the actions of let's say my peers. And there's a thing, I think it's self-serving bias. So what's going to happen here is that I'm going to wind up looking at the video, maybe recreating my narrative because I'm looking at the events in front of me, and now I'm creating my narrative based on what happened, but I'm going to be judging everybody else, even if they made a bad situation, from what happened as opposed to what their perspective was. So now I think that the concern with that is that we also start to lose out or eliminate the perspective of our peers and why they may have done actions. So now we could also come off as being divided, because here we are, the video shows one thing, and I may judge you based on what the video showed without even caring as to why you did what you did. And I think that could play out. I think that could be very divisive, because we all have our reasons for doing something. And if you're watching the video, I may see what, let's say, Russ did, but I don't know why he did it, but I'm going to judge Russ by what he did. So, again, if you're eliminating that perspective and you're going strictly by what the video shows, I think that could also affect, to some extent, the dynamic of the team. Because if I'm watching that video and I start creating my narrative based on the facts I see, I'm probably not even going to care what Russ thinks anymore, because all I care about is what I see clearly on the video. Something else I put out there was I thought we had the emotional toll on the officer. What I wrote here was repeated exposure to distressing footage, such as violent incidences, can take a psychological toll on officers, increasing stress and burnout. This exposure may also alter how officers report future events, potentially affecting their tone and neutrality. I wanted to put the emotional toll because, think about it. If I got assaulted by an inmate and, use of force, whatever is utilized, do I want to see myself getting assaulted multiple times to create whatever narrative I need? I think that could be truly detrimental for me. If I have to write a report, which I will, let me just let out my feelings in that as well, because there's a little bit of healing in that too when I write my report, and try to let out, again, when I say feelings, I may just more mean like your perspective. But now if I'm watching the video and, that's got to truly, here I am getting my ass kicked through the video. How many times am I willing to watch that and realize how close of a call I was to maybe even death? That's got to take its toll. So I figured I'd add that. What's your thoughts on that? Do you think there is an emotional toll when watching those videos, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely. I had one use of force that was paused for the matter of about 4 months because, you know, the officer that was involved in this use of force wound up getting cut with a razor blade from the top of his eye all the way down to the bottom of his jaw. And I mean, to the point where I could see his jaw moving, and bled a lot, scared the shit out of me. And unfortunately, even though you're the victim of this assault, you're still a victim and a participant in this use of force, and we have to get that statement. And I felt bad because, you know, he had to watch the video, and, you know, the first time he looked at it, you know, he's like, Jesus, man, look, I can't believe how close I came to just bleeding out. And then after that, it was, you know, after he watched it the second and the third time to see what the actions and reactions, and so he can get it all notated, you could tell he was getting pissed off. And he's like, you know, how many times I got to watch this thing for these fucking people up here to understand I got assaulted? Why does it matter what the fuck I put on this paper? Because I got assaulted. I got cut open. I got assaulted. So, you know, we just kind of had to take a break. You know, the powers that be were not happy about it because, you know, this guy was starting to show signs of PTSD. And I had to explain to him, I said, look, you know, he watched the video and it sparked something in him. He became emotionally despondent, started showing signs of PTSD. I'm not making him watch that goddamn thing anymore until, you know, either he gets some help or he says, you know what, I'm good. I've collected myself. Let's sit down and do this. You know, it absolutely will take a toll on a person, not just emotionally, physically. You know, because every time an officer watches himself get assaulted on a video, you're reliving that shit over and over again. You know, so yeah, it definitely has the capability of taking a toll on employees.
That's powerful, man. That's powerful. And you know what? You know, for the investigators that see that, they should note that, because now, even if the person's answering, they're not in the right state of mind. They may be more just willing to answer whatever it is to be more convenient to end the interview, as
you know,
opposed to really try to resolve the matter.
And, you know, now that I'm retired, now I can say it, you know, that during that process, I'm going to tell you, I got really, really pissed off at the administration and the executive division because, you know, to them, it was just another use of force. It was just another officer assault. You know, you're supposed to have this in 10 days. Why the hell do you need 4 months? Because he's on fucking family medical leave because he's got PTSD from damn near bleeding out on the cell block run. You know, you have to actually break it down and make them understand, because all they see are numbers and statistics. And, you know, to them, I was fucking with their statistics. And it really pissed me off. So, you know, to have to break it down to them that, you know, you had to put this thing on pause so this officer could go get emotional and mental help. You know, that use of force will be there when he gets back.
I like that, Joe. That's true? You know, and guys, just to let you know, I want to reiterate something here in compliment what Joe said is that, guys, if you got someone that's going through that amount of stress, and you can kind of tell, I think, you know, if it makes sense, like even if the guy's playing it, or the officers, you know, maybe playing the game a little bit, you should be able to determine with your expertise whether it's a game or not. But just be very careful, because if it's not a game, that person may say things just to end the interview because it's just a stressful moment. They're no longer thinking clearly about, I don't want to fight this anymore. I just can't deal with it. So they're going to try to start doing things that may feel that works in the favor to end the interview. And I think that happens a lot. I think that people get emotionally drained and they wind up making false submissions because at the end of the day, they're just so tired that they're not focused on resolving the matter. They're focused on, I got to get out of here. And that's what sometimes catches us up. What's your thoughts on this, Russ, with the emotional toll?
Yeah, you know, I don't think I can. I don't think that I, you know, can add or illuminate any more than Joe did right there, because that's powerful to me. You know, in the end, you know, we're not dealing with statistics and we're not dealing with numbers. We're dealing with real life people who are our brothers and sisters. And so I think that, you know, there's a real you know, lesson to be learned in what Joe said there, and for us to keep in mind that, you know, people are people, and if they're pushed too far they're going to be negatively impacted by it. And so when we're doing these things, I think that it's incumbent upon us to monitor them to some degree, rather than just decide that, well, hey, you know what, this individual, he or she will come and tell me if this is too much for them to handle. I think that we need to be much more proactive in that space with regards to the emotional toll on officers.
I agree. And I got two more left for the negativity, and then we'll cross right into the balance, which we can kind of speed through. But I do want to do these two more areas. We kind of touched on these, or this one in particular, but we could still maybe elaborate a little more. But I got the potential for selective reporting. So basically, officers may unconsciously align their reports with what the footage shows, omitting important details they personally observed but weren't captured on camera. This could lead to reports that feel mechanical, missing the depth needed for a full understanding of the incident. It's kind of what I talked about earlier. But me and Russ kind of had a very good discussion on this as well, because I feel, to me, that's the biggest concern. Me and Russ are always very big on getting that officer's perspective. The last thing we want as officers or as staff when we write a report is to be eliminating the perspective ourselves and not even realizing we're doing that. You know, that to me is key. So now all of a sudden, when you're drafting your report based on what's in front of you, what you see, you're no longer going to be utilizing what you felt. As I mentioned before, it's just going to be strictly factual. And I think when you write strictly factual, it doesn't allow for a connection to the human judgment, if you will. So if I'm writing facts, and let's say this has to go to a higher level, you're not taking into account the human element behind why you did what you did. And sometimes the human element, yeah, it's part of your trained role, but also could be just as a human. You know, I made this choice because this is how I felt. And why did you feel that way? Well, I felt this way because of A, B, C, D. I mean, I've seen people who've literally said stuff and they will tell you, I don't care what the video shows. That's how I felt. And it holds substantial weight as it travels down the line. But had they stuck with what the video just showed and wrote their narrative based on what the video just shows and eliminated or didn't even care for the depth of the, what they felt, they would have had a whole different outcome. But this person literally stayed focused on, I know it shows that, but let me tell you how I felt. And then when it got brought to the higher level, everybody connected to how he felt. You know, I get why you would feel that way. And at that point, it wasn't the facts that determined where the case was going. It wasn't A, B, C, D that was on the camera, but rather subjectively how the officer interpreted what they felt in the moment they were going through the incident. And by the way, just one last thing about that is, remember, guys, what you feel is truly based on the limited knowledge you have. And when you're creating that report based on, let's say, reviewing footage, you're creating it from a higher perspective of knowledge, you know, and you're drafting it without even realizing that you may be making shifts based on information that you couldn't have had when you've gone through it in the heat of the moment. But that potential for selective reporting, I think, would lean more towards drafting it very fact-driven and pretty much in line with the video. What's your thoughts on that, Russ?
Yeah, I think that, when I just see, just the words there, potential for selective reporting, I think that there's a potential for viewing the video and then just, signing off. Yeah, that's what I saw. And, if we were going to do that, why have you file a report at all? Is the video enough? No. I won't say that in every case, obviously, but no. When we talk about things with regards to especially use of force, the catchphrase, if you want to put it that way, or what the Supreme Court has decided, that it's based on your rightness or wrongness is based on the totality of the circumstances. It's not based on what the video has in it. It's not based on what your report has in it. It's based on what the two together have. So if we're just, you know, looking to go ahead and say, hey, yeah, that's what I saw on the video or whatever, we're not doing ourselves any favors, and we're cutting ourselves short with regards to being able to, you know, go out and justify and codify what we needed to do in that moment. So, you know, don't be doing that. The totality of the circumstances is really important. As I mentioned in that one incident that I was talking about, where we had pepper spray all over the ground, and I had, you know, the guy with his, you know, hands going into his waistband, and we were on top of him, and all of these things. The camera didn't know all those things. It couldn't see them all. It didn't know about the pepper spray. You know, it took someone on site and registering those things and going through the experience to know that all of those things were going on. And so, you know, just deciding that, oh, I'm just going to report what the camera saw. It's not gonna get us where we need to be, especially if something crops up later that presents a problem for us. You know, no, go in there, throw the whole kitchen sink in there, do a good report, and explain everything you need to explain.
Yeah, and guys, outside of extreme corruption, we're not talking about extreme corruption, but maybe a chance where the video is misunderstood. What's going to get you out of there is going to be what you felt about the situation. That should be, you know, something that should be allowed in from the investigative side, administration, all the way up to even gets to the criminal side. They have to allow for your perspective. So you don't want to get to the point where you're eliminating it without even digging deep. And I'm going to get to that in the last negative. Because we have one more negative, and the one more negative is more of a what I feel could happen. But what's your thoughts on this, Joe? The potential for selective reporting?
Yeah, I mean the person's personal thoughts, and at the time of this use of force is the whole reason why the use of force took place. So, you know, obviously you want their version of events in there. You know, when it came to use of forces, I was always the keep it simple, stupid person. Don't over embellish it. Don't add anything that's not there unless, you know, we have to justify why were we escorting this inmate, and then we had to, you know, just for whatever reason, put him on the ground. You know, that's the only time that we need to add something into our statement that wasn't seen on the video. We need to have that version of events. Why? Because he was attempting to assault me. He was, you know, attempting to bite me, spit on me. You know, there's been times where I've got called out as a reporting, or not as a reporting person, but as an investigator, because, you know, I see two officers escorting an inmate, all of a sudden they go to the ground. And, you know, I'm focused on the handcuffs, the placement of their hands on this inmate. I'm not looking at this inmate's feet. And the whole while, you know, this inmate's, you know, trying to kick the shit, trying to break this officer's shin. So they put him on the ground, you know. So when I forwarded my report, I had the officer come and say, hey, Lou, look, you know, I had to do that because this dude was kicking the shit out of me. So when I go back and review the video one more time and actually look at this offender's legs, lo and behold, he was actually trying to kick this officer. So I had to kind of revise what I had going on. So, you know, always be objective and understand that there's a reason why things happen on the video that you might not always see with the eye.
Yeah, now for this last one, for the last negative, and then we'll speed through real quick the balance, because I wanted to try to keep the show a little shorter, but it looks like it was a very engaged dialogue. So hopefully people, you know, really take into account the discussion, because that's what matters here, guys. It's not about giving just facts. Let's discuss it so you understand, you know, the perspective behind what's being said, so you know how to apply it. I wanted to add this over-reliance on and behavioral shift towards passive reporting. I was thinking of this after I got off the phone with Russ. My biggest concern was, because me and Russ had a really good discussion on this, and my biggest concern is that we start getting used to relying on the video footage. So through time, I actually call this passive reporting, which is basically I'm just sitting there writing what the video shows as opposed to what I felt. And then the sad thing is we become reliant on it. So I'm not going to write my report until I see the video. And I think that's where we start to get into a problem where, you know, you get some people right now that want to write the report because they want to quickly, you know, tell you what they did, how they felt, whatever it is, their perspective, where now we get staff just not wanting to write anything until they see the video first. And I think that could truly hurt the agency in the long run, because right now what we need out there is our perspective. I mean, to be honest with you, my biggest concern in the long run is if you're just going to write what's the camera showing without the perspective, just what the camera's showing, then eventually I won't even need your report. Let's eliminate reports altogether. We'll just go with video footage. And that's kind of where we're headed now, sadly. But yeah, I thought that was just you know, maybe in the future we wind up having staff that just become so over-reliant on the video that they wind up shifting their behaviors to just what the video shows, as opposed to actively writing what they felt. Okay, do you guys have any comments on that, or do you guys want to go right into the balance part?
Well, I have one real quick comment on that, and you know, I've alluded to this, I think, quite often through this discussion is that you know, just going back again to the totality of the circumstances, you know, that report is your chance to color in everything else that the camera didn't see, didn't know, and couldn't probe. And so if anything ever goes wrong, and you may not even think that the incident that you're involved in has the potential to go wrong, and it does, you'll be glad that you went in there and you filled in and you colored everything in that you could, and that you provided as much context and as much, you know, extra information as you could. So, you know, don't leave that opportunity for these things to go wrong for you. So many times, you know, I've been glad. I was glad I put that extra little bit in. So don't just think, oh, I just want to get this over with. You know, provide and make and create good work product. I mean, that's what we're paid to do, right? We're paid to produce good work product.
And Joe, do you have anything before we get into that balance, or?
No, I'm pretty much on board with everything that Russ said.
All right, so for the balance, guys, so this is basically for facilities that allow for a balance of both. And I don't like the either. I'm not. I don't like leaving things either or. I want to try to give a balance of both. So for the facilities that are allowing for staff to utilize video before writing their reports, I want to make sure we try to bring a balance down. I do want to mention one other thing too, and I think it's mentioned in the book when it comes to ethical considerations. Actually, let me see if it's mentioned here, and maybe I could. Maybe we'll wind up discussing it anyway. I don't know if it is. But I know where to put it in, actually. Okay, so the first thing I have here, and this is actually throughout my book anyway, just in general, is you always should be taking notes of incidences anyway. So officers should write preliminary notes immediately after an incident to capture their observations, emotions, and nonverbal cues. These notes provide a personal perspective that complements the objective lens of the video. So granted, if you are going to look at the video to frame a narrative, I think you should also have the notes to complement what you're seeing. I'll go with Russ first, and we'll kind of speed through these. Russ, what's your thoughts on that?
Okay, here's my thought on that. For me, I would never do that because the way that I see it is that if I can't produce those notes and they're subpoenaed and they put me up on the stand, and they say, well, where are those notes? And I go, well, I got no idea. Then it makes me look like I've covered things up. But that's just my own paranoia, perhaps speaking. So that's not something that I made a habit of doing. In that particular thing. And I know some people may not like me saying that, but I just think that I don't trust lawyers. If that makes any sense. Tell me what you think. Let's have some back and forth.
Well, Russ, when we wrote the book, part of the when you're writing incident reports is critical for note taking in case you can't get to the reports right away. So we highlight throughout the book the importance of taking note taking. And we also highlight a part where notes could be subpoenaed. We put that inside the book. So,
I do. I just when I think about that, I'll just tell you the way that I did. That for me, I wouldn't do it that way. But also, I'm pretty on point with my report writing, and so I take lots of mental notes. But that's just my thing. I know not everyone operates the same way that I do. I know someone who was made to look bad because of that. And they weren't covering anything up. They were just, they just would take some notes and then throw them away.
All right. So I just don't want to, I get why people could have a history where it's on the negative side, but it doesn't negate the fact that best practices would usually be to have notes that could cover the immediate incident while you're waiting to be able to write it. So you do take into account later on, depending on when you write it, what you felt in that moment, what you saw that you may forget later on when you're reviewing the footage. Because remember, if it is a time-consuming process, a lot of your decision-making in the moment could be forgotten, or the reason behind the decision-making could be forgotten when you're reviewing the footage. So I would still agree, with note taking. Again, that's a big backbone of what we put. And it is noted, as I said, that it could be subpoenaed. So even the note taking should be somewhat professional. But usually when they're subpoenaed, if I take personal notes, of the incident, that doesn't mean I'm going to keep them. I may chuck it, and if I don't have it, I don't have it. It is what it is. But if I do have it, hopefully it benefits the case. But if I don't have it, I don't have it. I to be honest with you, after I wrote my report, some of my personal notes, I may not even keep. I wrote my report. It's done. But I do agree with creating the personal notes and then utilizing that just to create balance when you're trying to balance what you subjectively, your perspective and what's, factual as you're creating the narrative on the video. Joe, what's your thoughts as well on that?
Well, from a lieutenant standpoint, I can tell you one thing. If I wasn't taking physical notes, or keeping track of the events of use of force via some sort of timeline, if it was something where I didn't have the time to actually write it down at that moment, my central control operator already knew that, if I wasn't taking notes, I was calling it on the radio. And, at that time, she was taking care of my timeline for me. So, at 11:03, Lieutenant Pomponio ordered the authorization of chemical agents. 11:05, the cell door was open. 11:05, 5-man move team went in, or whatever the case was. I was always calling it on the radio because of the fact that keeping a professional timeline of an incident that takes place keeps you from having to review the video footage, because you were calling it out step by step by step, and it was being recorded step by step by step at a specific time, at a specific time, at a specific time. So you pretty much already have a narrative going forward. So you can keep that you got something to base your summary and your statement of events just based off of that timeline. And I always found it helpful for me because I didn't have to go back and look at the video camera and go, okay, what time was that when we went in? 11:04. Okay. We used chemical agents at 11:05, because I called it out on the radio as we were doing it. So my central control operator was writing it down and doing a timeline on the radio log for me. So all I had to do was go back and get a copy of that radio log, and I knew the version of events and what was happening from front to back without even having to review the footage.
Yeah, and I think that helps. Imagine if you're working at a facility where it's incident after incident after incident after incident. You got to be able to, how you're going to remember. It's going to start to blur. But I get it, Russ. I don't want to be careful of not doing what is expected because we could have had a negative interaction and then generalize. And I think at that point there, we wind up truly not doing the right thing because of the likelihood as opposed to what the probability may be. Okay, so this is key to me, guys. Use the video as a supplement and not as a replacement for facilities should make it clear that video experience enhances reports, but does not replace the officer's narrative. Both perspectives are essential for a comprehensive understanding of an event. The reason why I like this is it does put the priority back into the perspective of the individual, and then the support of what's seen on the video. So I'm very big on this, and I've mentioned that. I don't want, and the guys at an agency level too, bear with me on this. You don't want the video to be the primary. You want the video to be the supplement. I need that officer's perspective. I need that perspective, and I need us to know that I need the staff to know we want their perspective. So I love the fact that the priority is really how the officer felt when they were going through with it, going through with what they were going through with, and then, okay, let's see what the facts say and see if any of this comes together in pieces well. What's your thoughts on that, Joe?
Yeah, definitely use the video as a supplement, you know, as go to it, you know, based as your primary for the initial version of events, but don't use it as your totality of things. You know, supplement it along with your staff version of events. Hell, it could even be your central control operator. You know, if you do like I do and have them record a timeline as you're going, as things are progressing in a use of force, especially when you're calling, you know, he's in custody, he's now being escorted to medical, you know, everything that you're saying, she's jotting down and she's putting the time with it. So you have a pretty accurate event, like I said, without having to go to the video. Now you can use the video as a supplement, you know, to show that he was being combative or being belligerent or attempting to be assaultive as you're going to medical after you got him restrained or prior to. But it shouldn't be used as the totality of things. There should be other things in place and involved in that scenario that can be used as well.
Yeah, and guys, remember something too. This is an effort to not change the integrity of the report, but rather enhance it to some extent. So I just want to be very careful when people, you know, if you're writing a report and then later on you see the video and something's different, or I don't know, slightly different, or however it wants to be, you got to be careful when you start changing what's on the report. I mean, it's okay to add, you know, or maybe get clarity, but you don't want to get to a point where you're writing these official reports and then later on you see the video and you're being called back in to change everything you wrote, because the integrity of the agency, your integrity, all that is not really an ethical practice. Again, you write what you feel, you watch the video, you create some clarity. You could, you know, maybe add what needs to be added to. I mean, again, you know, time constraints of report. I love that. You know, now you got to add things that you didn't think of before because, you know, you may not have enough time to add it the first time. But if you start, you know, writing your report, then watching the video, and then start writing, which after you watch the video, it changes the whole integrity of the report. Eventually, that practice is going to be up to question, and you're going to have a lot of explaining to do. I feel. I don't think that's going to hold well in court. And I think I mentioned that in the book. What's your thoughts on that, Russ, as a video as a supplement and not a replacement?
Yeah, I just harken back to what I said before with regards to, you know, the totality of the circumstances. You know, you're the one that's providing the color commentary, if I can, you know, use that as an analogy to it. And so, you know, don't deprive yourself of that chance to get, you know, all of the evidence possible in there. That totality of the circumstances is part of all of the evidence. So, you know, don't let that, you know, that color commentary, as it will, slip by, you know, and let that video be the final thing that speaks. But everything else should have led up to the context there. That doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to use things in that order, if you will. But just you know, think about it that way. Think about it as if that video didn't exist, and you really need this one for the win. And so go in there and, you know, do your best to provide every bit of information that you can.
Yeah, and guys, with the increase of technology, I mean, we could create templates, structured reporting frameworks that allow for questions that could be both objective and subjective. That's a balance too. So providing templates that prompt officers to include both subjective and objective details ensures well rounded report. So you have feelings, impressions, and assessments should coexist with video confirmed facts. And again, that's great to make a template because that will bring some consistency. So when people are writing the reports, they're being prompt to introduce those thoughts of, especially the assessment. I think the assessment is key because the assessment is what's going to ultimately lead to your subjective perspective, and the assessment's going to change. The assessment of you going through it is going to change later on when you're reviewing it and you see everything. So it's funny when you write the assessment as you're going through it, that's going to pretty much take into context what you felt, the true context of the moment. But then later on, when you see the video and it's going to be a whole different assessment. It's going to be assessment from knowledge that you didn't have that you're now judging yourself on. What's your thoughts on that, Russ? The structured reporting framework.
Yeah, that's kind of I don't know, for good or bad. For me, that's kind of like an afterthought. That's it's kind of like something that's, for me at least, is so baked into the cake. I don't know that I have anything really to add to that.
Okay, that was quick. You have anything, or we can go to the next one? You have anything, Joe, on that one?
No, I mean, I think we pretty much hit that one in the head by now. That when we're doing reporting, we need to have some sort of structure to putting our uses of force together in our statements, and that we need to be factual and concise and what we put in there.
All right, so I could speed through it. We have a few more. We could speed through. So if you guys have something you want to comment on this, then just give me the heads up and I'll go. So the next one I have is incorporate regular training scenarios, which we did already. We talked about that briefly, but basically I have regular exercises where officers write reports and without access to video help reinforce their judgment and observational skills. So a little bit different than what we said before, ensuring they remain sharp and confident in high pressure situations. I think that matters. That kind of alleviates what I said before about being over reliant on it. So now what we'll do is, if they are allowing us to use video, then maybe another effort would be we go through a scenario and then I tell you, looking at video, you write down what you felt, your assessment, and all this other stuff. And that can kind of keep us, like Russ said, we always want to keep ourselves critically thinking. And I mean, think about it, guys, now with ChatGPT right now, it's a lot more convenient to have it write your thought out than you writing your own thoughts. So you got to still make sure you maintain that gift, that skill, because if you don't, all of a sudden, when you have to write something, you no longer can. So same thing here. If finally there's a moment where I have to write how I feel, I may forget how because I haven't been writing reports in that structure, I guess. But I think that's a good thing so you don't become over-reliant. Would you guys agree with that? And when we go to the next one, you guys have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just touch on it briefly. I mean, I used to do scenarios on video camera with offenders, trustees, of course, but I would do scenarios, record them on camera, and then I would show it to my shift. Just a brief 3-minute video of a confrontational situation that led to a use of force. I would show them that video, and then after the video, I wouldn't allow them to review it again. I would tell them to go ahead and write me a statement as to what you witnessed in that video, and you would be surprised how many different versions you would get. But that was a good thing. And, we would kind of review it and, people would kind of open the eyes of some of the people as to what they see.
Yeah. And Russ, you had a thought on that as well, Russ?
Yeah, I can just piggyback on what Joe said there a little bit. Being able to go in there and write what you've seen on seeing a video just one time, that used to be kind of like the standard of like one of the tests I took one time when I was trying to get into investigations, was being able to do that and being able to look at the incident, look at the video with fidelity, and then in one shot be able to try and get as much information in that as you could. And I think that's a good benchmark to look at when you're actually, starting the writing process after a critical incident. Is to get as much down on the page as you can, and forget about the video. Forget about it for the time being. You might have to go back and clarify things or get some additional information off of it or whatever. But just start getting your report out there, and don't shy away from it, man. I know a lot of people that, oh my God, I have to I have to do a report. No, you should welcome it and embrace it, and try and take every opportunity that you can to write so that you get better at it, so that it becomes second nature. Don't be fearing the process, be embracing it.
Yeah, and guys, to piggyback on what Russ said at the very beginning of the video, if you notice here in the last few thoughts, when we create balance, the primary is always going to be how you feel. And I think the reason why sometimes we may feel that the video carries more weight is because we're used to the video being held against us. And therefore, when the video is held against us, we're probably used to people minimizing our perspective in order to get us to push more towards what the video shows. And I guess if you're on opposing sides, maybe that makes sense, because anybody could create a perspective that fits a narrative where they can minimize accountability. But to be honest with you, you can't be afraid of that, because if that's how you truly felt, then you got to put it out there. And as I said, the video is a great partnered element, but the perspective, as you could see here, truly does matter. And don't allow yourself, as Russ said at the very beginning, to be confused by people using the video against you to say that's where the priority is, because at the end of the day, it's not. It's always going to be about how you felt. We kind of touched on this, but time limit for video reviews. One little thing we didn't touch on yet, though, in this part here is, first, we have to avoid delays. Facilities should set reasonable deadlines for video reviews. This ensures reports are timely and prevents officers from becoming too dependent on footage for every detail. Well, actually, we did kind of touch on all that. Anybody? Yeah, we can roll through that one.
Yeah,
we kind of touched on that. I also have foster a culture of accountability and trust. Supervisors should emphasize the value of the officer's instincts, reinforcing that their personal observations are just as crucial as video evidence. This builds trust and encourages active engagement during incidences. I mean, I would love for us collectively, management, the investigative division, the public at large, whatever it is, the court system, supervisors, especially on that front line, to let staff know we want to hear your voice. Tell us what happened, so we could build trust, and then people will be more open to remember how important that is. As I said before, if you minimize staff's perspective, if you focus on video and that's your primary, then staff is going to feel that what they say don't matter, because judgment's coming purely from the video as opposed to why they've done stuff. I think we've covered that a little bit. Do you guys have anything else you want to add on that, or?
No, I think we pretty much covered that pretty well.
All right, let me skip to the next one. Audit. We have two more. Audit and feedback mechanisms. Regular audits ensure reports maintain a healthy balance between observation and video evidence. Let's see. Feedback helps officers refine their reporting style, avoiding mechanical or overly simplified narratives. Hey guys, I want to mention one other thing that may touch on this when it said mechanical, oversimplified narratives. I think another thing that we didn't discuss real quick, and that really would be a negative, is if you rely too much on the video, everybody's reports are going to be pretty much identical. And that doesn't look well as it starts to travel up. It looks rather scripted. I think people start to realize that there should be slight differences because everybody sees things differently. So it's going to look like you've been coached or relying too much on the narrative. Yeah, Russ, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so one of the things that you had brought up earlier is when we're talking about, doing the report, and this is where the first person perspective is key. When we're doing these reports and we're working to tell them from a first person perspective, that's going to automatically incorporate variations into the report. When we try and do things from a third person perspective, or we try and tell it from what the video saw, that's what kills variations. And we want variations. We want different viewpoints. We want different perspectives, because that's what the totality of circumstances is all about. So really foster and encourage that with your staff, to get down in the weeds and tell about the nitty gritty of what was going on when you were on the bottom of that dog pile as best you could hear, smell, and feel. And I think that really does, add to the credibility of it all when we're able to do things like that, if that makes sense.
No, that's spot on. Guys, there's a whole section on first person and third person. And one of the parts we wrote in the section is that it's good to write first person if you're directly involved in the incident, because it brings people into the story of what's being told. And that definitely really works well when you want to discuss things that are subjective. And they say for third person perspective, it could usually relate more to when you're investigating something, or you have to be seen as more objective. And that allows for people when they read it to see that you're a step removed.
Yeah. And let me just add this about the first person perspective. The first person perspective is really superior for report writing for this purpose alone. When people that are not involved in corrections read this stuff, and I'm talking about like juries, judges, people like that, when you tell things from a first person perspective, they read it and establish themselves as being you in the process, right? If this thing is told from a third person perspective, it all starts to bleed together on them. And so if they read 4 or 5 first person perspectives, they inherently understand it better from the perspective of each person that told it, because they become Officer Smith, they become Officer Jones, they become Sergeant Pomponio, if you will, right? When they're reading it from a third person perspective, it just all bleeds over because they have no perspective to anchor themselves as to what's going on, because it all starts to sound like jargon and like you're just relating a story, and there is not enough variation in that for them to be able to get that feeling of being anchored by one person at a time telling that story.
Yeah, and guys, what we will do one day is we're going to take that book, craft it into a course. I think it would be good if all 3 of us could teach it at once, because we're providing 3 unique perspectives from management on down. So each perspective looks for things a bit differently. But I could just imagine how great a report would be if we all found a way to combine those perspectives. And I think I did well with that when we wrote the book, because we all kind of have our part. And I think, maybe later on that could be something that we could give back to the profession. Because to be honest with you, outside of the video footage, which is a bit of a nuance right now, good report writing has pretty much been steady. I think so. I mean, outside of just, as I talked about, the video footage now being more utilized, we back in the day before video footage was even introduced, I mean, a good solid report in corrections is all you needed. That's all you needed, and even when you can't get the footage, sometimes that report holds weight in court, but a good solid report holds so much weight. And I don't think much has changed when it comes to writing a report. So I think that, we can kind of bring in a good course based on what we have in the book and answer some of those questions that have always been up in the air. First, third, Army time, which I have in the book, the using of the video. So the last thing I got is mental health support, providing resources, mental health support, and is stress management programs. So providing resources for stress management helps officers manage the emotional toll of reviewing distressing footage, preserving their mental clarity and emotional well-being. We kind of talked about, I even have in the book about the psychological impact of report writing, especially after the report, after the incident, but maybe even now, so watching the video multiple times as Joe's story had it. But I guess we can come into closing, guys. I mean, we covered a lot. This could definitely be a component of the training of. But guys, want to hear something funny? This whole thing we talked about is only 3 pages of that 300-page book. I mean, that's pretty much this 2-hour discussion was 3 pages, and it's just a valuable discussion at that. Joe, anything you'd like to say in closing?
Yeah, that one thing I wanted to touch on in closing, when it comes to getting statements from different people, they shouldn't be identical to each other, but they should complement each other. The reason why we get statements from different people is because we want to know from the first person view what you did in this action. Especially when it goes to a jury, the first person view, the first person statements always gives an in-depth view of what so-and-so did, what so-and-so did, what so-and-so did. The third person summary, which is normally done by, in Texas, is done by the lieutenants. Even if we are a participant, we still got to do the third person summary. We still have to be objective in those third-person summaries. We have to notate faults. We have to notate, the actions of others, both good and bad. And after a while, especially when it goes to a jury, the jury tends to look at the third-person view as a general, broad overview of the entire situation, and then they look at the first-person statements as an individual and specific view of the situation. So, those statements should not, be identical to each other, but they should complement and coincide with each other as to the actions of a use of force. Body cams and video cameras, body cams are only as good as they make them. Anybody who has seen any kind of police dramas where they're in foot chases or, in the heat of active battle, trying to detain somebody or trying to bring somebody into arrest, you can always tell that the body cams are shaky at best, and you can't always see the total picture, although you're here what's going on. Don't let the video, take precedence over what's actually happening. Always be mindful that the fact that the video doesn't always capture everything that's going on. So don't rely on just video alone to, gain any kind of interpretation as to what happened. As far as the staff's concerned, both frontline staff, supervision, those cameras are there. We put them in for everybody's protection. We put them in there for the staff protection. We put them in there for, the protection of offenders from other offenders. When staff may not be in the immediate area to be able to capture visually what happened. We use the video cameras for that reason. I see online and through the Facebook groups where, a lot of these officers are condemning the use of body cams and the use of video footage. They're just trying to cross us out. That's not necessarily the case. We're short-staffed people. We need all the help we can get. And if we can get it from a video camera as to how an incident took place, then, I'm definitely going to do it, because I know you may be serving chow. You may be calling pill line. You may be running day room. You may not be on the run when this happens. So, the video cameras and body cams are imperative for us, more for our protection as to the totality of what actually happened in a situation. It's not there to cross us out. So, a lot of you guys out there in Facebook land and on these certain Facebook groups need to kind of, I'm not going to say refrain from using those, but, try to get your brain in tune to the fact that, they're there for your protection as well.
I love that, Joe. I think that's spot on. I think that, let me see something real quick. I'm actually looking at the book now. I think the stuff that we do on this channel real quick is stuff that goes beyond tips. I think that, having these discussions, bringing each other's perspective, whether we agree or not, each perspective matters, because it's coming from years of experience, but also from different areas of the profession. And it's great, because if we don't agree with something, sometimes we find out that it's really from where we sit or where we once sat. And then to be able to find out where that middle road is. You never know where there's a conflict of thought until you actually have the discussion and realize, oh my God, you saw that differently than we did. And how do you bridge that gap? And a big thing about that is as we talked about, is report writing. Report writing should translate any conflict in perspective, so we're all on the same page. And again, I think some of the best report writers are literally old school. I mean, they're old school because they know what people are going to ask, and they know how to answer it and hold to their report. Russ, anything you'd like to say in closing?
I'll dovetail just a little bit on what Joe said there, in that the camera is what we make of it. And rather than trying to find the negatives, really accentuate the positives and leverage them for the protection of you, for the protection of your fellow staff members, for the protection of the public, for the protection of the inmates themselves. I, once again, just like Joe, I see a lot of people on there so negative about it, and where does that negativity come from? It just comes from, a misplaced expectation that the camera is going to be used for evil, or it's going to be used to rein you in. And if you need reining in, maybe you don't belong in this profession. You don't have to agree with, everything that your particular department says is a good policy or procedure, but you have to have some type of moral fiber in your being to do this job to the best of your ability, and just the idea that, hey, I'm not going to be able to get away with as much. Well, you know what? You need to check yourself and, reassert whatever the North Star is in your life, which is your oath. And it's always going to be your oath. And you owe that oath to everyone. You owe that oath to yourself. You owe that oath to the public, most of all. You owe that oath to your fellow brothers and sisters that are wearing the badge the same as you. And you owe that oath even to the inmates, whether you like it or not. So, you know what? Leverage the cameras and quit complaining about it.
Yeah, guys. And I think one of the things that, again, my closing thought is that we're trying to bring back our perspective. So you kind of want, to some level, an independent recollection of events. That's in here in the book as well. Because if not, it does start creeping into the constructive narrative, which automatically brings questions into the court as to, was this coached? But I think it's a good topic. I think we touched on areas that haven't been touched on before. And I think this does provide clarity in regards to whatever your facility is utilizing. This gives you clarity as where the benefits are, where the cons are, and how do you work things together. But mind you, we still feel that the scale tips towards the subjective perspective, towards the, how you felt, and then using the footage as supplemental. And I hope we don't shift from that, because it makes sense why we may feel we have to rely on it. But you're going to eliminate your own perspective, and you're going to be your worst enemy. I mean, how many times we watch a video and we see things that maybe the public doesn't see, and all we're waiting for is, why ain't somebody asking the officer? And then here we are, when we get caught up, we want to see the video. It doesn't make any sense. We want to put our perspective in first. But as always, guys, the show is Tear Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify every time I post a video. Stay safe.